I'm a longtime lurker of this thread. I can't sleep, so I thought I would share a story that happened to me about a year ago. For backstory, I'm a 30-year-old female on the petite side. I live on the East Coast, where the sunrise isn't until 6:30 or 7 in the wintertime. I worked opening shifts at Starbucks as a manager, and on these particular shifts, I picked up the girl that I opened with, because she lived close to the store and didn't have a car. This takes place at around 4:30 a.m. and it's very dark. I'm driving down an empty main road, decently close to the girl's apartment complex when an old, kinda beat up forest green sedan seemingly comes out of nowhere and is behind me. We are the only cars on the road. I turn on my blinker to turn at a light on the way to the complex, which is in a very dark area of town behind a bunch of offices and developments. I'm about 5 minutes away. The first red flag for me is how quickly the car turns on their blinker after I do. They start speeding up a bit. I speed up and they match my speed. I get a bad feeling, so I figured I would take an unexpected turn to lose them and circle back. As soon as my blinker turns on, so does theirs. Any turn I take, they are taking as well. I'm freaking out after a few minutes of trying to lose them, so I pull into a nursing home parking lot assuming that they'll give up. Well, so do they with no turn signal. Mind you, because they weren't expecting it and they park across from me. I see the driver and it's a woman, probably in her 50s with a small white dog. She looks slightly unkempt but not crazy or out of it, just like a dumpy, middle-aged woman. She rolls down her window, so I roll down mine and ask, "Is everything okay?" To which she replies in kind of a mumble, "I thought you were my friend. She has the same kind of car," or something along those lines. I've never seen her before, so I say, "Okay, I'm not, but no problem, have a good day," or whatever. Weird, but okay, fine. So I shrug it off and I go on my way. I wasn't too shaken up. If it had been a man, I would have straight up called 911 immediately. As I leave the parking lot, the woman started to follow me again. I'm close to the girls' complex on some very dark roads and I'm freaking out. But I figure she's obviously not quite right, and she wouldn't pull into a big apartment complex's parking lot. Well, I was wrong. I'm at a stop sign right before the entrance, crazy lady behind me and all, when I noticed a red fox scurry by. This is only important because I strongly believe in signs from the universe, so it was a weird coincidence that I see my favorite animal in this moment of terror. I pull into the complex parking lot, and the crazy lady parks next to me. We're just sitting there for a moment, neither of us looking at each other. I lock my doors and roll down my passenger side window halfway, finger on the button in case anything gets weird. She rolls down her driver's side window, and I ask straightforwardly, "Why are you following me?" She then replies, "I'm following you," and then repeats what she had said to me at the last parking lot, that she thought I was her friend. It was very strange, almost scripted. Now I'm feeling very uneasy, because it is extremely obvious that she had been, and I know it's smart to mention that I'm meeting someone. So I say, "Well, I'm clearly not, and I'm here to pick up a friend, so I'm not sure what to tell you." I roll up my windows and she watches me take out my phone and call my employee, and to whom I say, "Come down this second," and she leaves immediately once I'm on the phone. My employee rushes down and I explain what happened, and we both agree that it is creepy as hell. As we pull out of the complex's entrance, the red fox runs in front of my car, causing me to slam on my brakes and stop, and then it runs off into some woods on the side of the road. I have never forgotten this morning ever. And so, crazy lady with a little white dog, let's not meet again. Since almost a year now, the end of August 2019 to be exact, I have moved to an apartment in a different city because my mother, who I lived with in my hometown, passed away. I had moved here with my long-term boyfriend and one other roommate, who has been a good friend to both of us since before we had even started dating. We all absolutely love it here. The location is great. It's a 15-minute bike ride from my university, and it's located at a square with a grocery store, a drugstore, lunchrooms, and so on. So, we pretty much have everything we could possibly need to survive within walking distance. However, after just a month or two of living here, someone has started to ring my doorbell at exactly 11:05 p.m., semi-regularly. Sometimes every day, sometimes every other day. Sometimes there's a week in between, and sometimes there are a couple of weeks in between. But it is always at around 11:05 p.m., and every single time, I get no answer each time I ask through the intercom who it is. Except for one time, but I'll get into that in a bit. At first, I thought it were friends from one of the neighbors who accidentally rang the wrong doorbell. But after the fourth time, I grew suspicious. And after more than those 4 times, I started noticing that it always happens at either exactly 11:05 p.m. or a few minutes earlier or later. My boyfriend and roommate both work at bars, and so they work until pretty late, and they would usually only get home at around 2 a.m. So each time it happened, I was always at home, alone. And it started to really freak me out after a while. When I first told them about it, they kind of shrugged it off and said that it was probably a wrong dial, like I thought at first. But when I told them that it had happened so many times, and sometimes even daily, they didn't really believe me and thought that I was just a little paranoid and spooked out. However, one night, when the doorbell rang again, and I answered the intercom asking who it was, I heard very heavy breathing. I was thoroughly spooked at that moment. I was again home alone and kept asking who they were and what they wanted. I couldn't make up from the breathing if it was a man or a woman, but I heard a strange mumbling and whispering. And then it was dead silent, and they had appeared to have left. I had put my apartment door on a double lock after that. I was so scared. Thankfully, my roommate got home a little earlier that night, around 30 minutes after the doorbell rang, and he could tell how upset I was. Now, with the current crisis, my roommate and boyfriend aren't able to work anymore, and they now also witness the frequent door ringing at 11:05 p.m., so they do now believe me and agree that it is very odd and creepy. We have a balcony that looks down at where our apartment building's main front door is, but because there also is a shop right underneath us that always has those curtain roof things out, the view to the door is always partially obscured. Every time our doorbell rang, me, my boyfriend, and roommates would all go to the balcony to see if we could see anyone, but we never could. I have also asked my neighbors from my apartment building if their doorbell also gets rang so often, but the ones that I asked all said that it never happened to them. So, 2 weeks ago, my roommate decided to do some investigating and went outside our apartment building at 11 p.m., standing across the street and pretended to have a smoke while keeping an eye on the door. He said that he did see a man who looked kind of suspicious wandering around our apartment building, who slowed down his pace significantly as soon as he approached our door. But when he spotted my roommate looking at him, he quickly walked away. We weren't 100% sure if that's the door ringer, but that was very, very suspicious. Our doorbell hadn't been rang at night since that day, and I'm hoping that maybe it'll stop now. But there is a possibility that it will continue again in a few weeks. So, a strange doorman who rings my doorbell at 11:05 at night so often, please stop, and let's please never meet. Many of you suggested that I go outside every night at 11 p.m. so I can catch the guy in action. I would have done that if it weren't for the constant different intervals of time between each door ring. Like I said, sometimes the ringing would stop for weeks, and to go outside at night every day for weeks, especially during the winter time, while something that might not even happen, didn't seem like an effective method for me. Many of you also suggested that I install a camera above my doorbell. We have a huge intercom doorbell board for all the bells of the apartment, so I can't install a camera there, unfortunately, as I do not have an individual bell system. If this keeps up, I'm gonna contact the police about it. I've been planning and asking more neighbors from other apartment buildings next to ours if this also happens to them. If it doesn't, I'll call the police the next time that it does. I, however, doubt that they'll do anything right now, since with the current crisis, the police will not only respond to serious crimes or immediate threatening situations. So, when I was in high school, I wasn't a very hardworking student. I wasn't a troublemaker, but I was an incredibly lazy girl, working just the minimum so that my parents wouldn't get angry. I've always had some kind of easiness regarding schoolwork, and never knew what it truly meant to make any efforts. So, I spent all of my classes drawing on my copybooks without many consequences. My junior year math teacher, who was seen by everyone as uptight but very caring, he was pretty upset about this, as were many of my previous teachers. He wanted me to work harder. I wasn't bad at math. I got around a B or a B-, but sometimes my grades would be very low. During a parent-teacher conference, he told my mom that I was wasting my potential, that it was infuriating how lazy I was. My mom then replied that she agreed with him, and that she wouldn't blame him for pushing me harder to make me work harder. And from this day on, he did exactly what she told. In every math class, he would always question me first before everyone else, was always sitting next to me when we were doing exercises. During the test, he was always telling me, "You can do it." He made me feel incredibly uncomfortable because, at this age, no one wants to be the class's focus. My classmates started to realize that my math teacher was a little obsessed with me, and they were teasing me a lot about this. The last class before Christmas break, the math teacher threw a little surprise Christmas party. It was nice. He gave us chocolates and mock champagne, and we had a lot of fun. During the party, he poured me a glass of mock champagne, telling me that I deserved it, because I was doing a lot better. And it was true, I had moved up to around an A or an A-. I accepted it, but I didn't drink it entirely. I have diabetes and I already had too much chocolate. But during the next class, I was feeling really bad. I almost fainted and finished my last day of school before Christmas in the nurse's office. At the time, I wouldn't even think that it was because of the alcohol-free champagne. I thought it was due to my diabetes, that I indeed had too much chocolate, even if it didn't look like my usual crisis. A few weeks later, my class threw some kind of charity event. It was a class project and we were very proud of it. In my country, we don't have prom, so it was our occasion to wear pretty formal clothing and to dance together. The math teacher was invited, and he was helping some of the boys to attend to the bar. He served me an alcohol-free cocktail, but before I could even drink it, a classmate of mine, Flora, poured some vodka in it, even though it was forbidden to bring alcohol to the event. I was mad because, with my diabetes, I couldn't drink alcohol, so I told her that she just ruined the cocktail. At the time, I thought she did, but now when I think about it, I wonder if she didn't choose to drink it instead. The event ended pretty badly because of the alcohol Flora had brought. Some guys were very drunk and they started breaking things and so on, and Flora passed out because of all the alcohol that she had. This ended the event. Flora had been admitted to the hospital because her coma was pretty severe, and we spent the next day being lectured by all the teachers of the school. Flora got expelled from the school and never went again. I was very upset with her, And because of her, every event would now have been forbidden and our project was a failure. We gave a very bad image to the association that we were raising funds for, so I kind of ghosted her and never asked her if she was doing better, etc. And now I feel bad about this, but at the time, I was immature. But because of that, I will never know if she was ill because of the alcohol or because of my cocktail. A few weeks later, I failed a math test. It had been a long time since I had done that, and my math teacher was very angry. He yelled at me in front of everyone, saying how much of a disappointment I was, that I was hopeless, that I would just end up living in a cardboard box under a bridge. Something was off. I was feeling it. He had a very weird look in his eyes. It chilled me and I couldn't help it. I started crying. He calmed down a bit and said that he would just give me an hour of detention, during which I will copy my lesson. I was a little surprised normally because detention is for bad behavior, not for bad grades. But I was a little relieved because it was a small punishment. My parents would never know. Indeed, I lived kind of far from my high school, and there was only one bus every night between my high school and my home at 5 p.m. And because of that, even when I finished at 4 p.m., I would never get home before 5 p.m. And when I've had detention between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m., my parents would never know. But then when he officially gave me the detention hour, he said that he wanted to be personally present, and it was only possible between 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. I was really nervous, because I would have to tell my parents to come get me at 6 p.m., and they would know everything. As I said earlier, I wasn't a troublemaker, so at first I planned to go to the detention hour, but during the day, my friends and I talked a lot about it, and I was feeling more rebellious because of the sensation of being supported by my friends. So I decided to not tell my parents that I was in detention, and that one of my friends would pick me up at 6 p.m. and drive me home. At 5 p.m., when heading towards the detention room, I was angry, mumbling that it wasn't fair to be in detention because of one and only bad grade. When I arrived in front of the detention room, I realized I was the only one waiting. I then realized that I would be the only student in detention, alone with a math teacher who was a little obsessive, and it was getting dark outside. It was during late winter, early spring, so the night was early. This was a big nope for me, and when I saw him coming, I panicked. I said something like, "Sorry, I have an emergency. I have to go now. I'll email the school for rescheduling my detention hour." And then I ran off. He started to yell at me that I had to obey him and go to detention, and that he would call my parents, and at this moment I didn't care. I sprinted towards the bus stop and caught my bus at the last second, and I went home. I was afraid that he would have called my parents, so when I arrived, I was shaking, but my parents greeted me normally, so I assumed that eventually he didn't call them. He never came back the next day, nor the next weeks. Eventually, I learned that he had quit his position. The school therapist came during an hour to ask us if we wanted to talk about the math teacher, but as nobody knew what was going on with him, we didn't have much to say, and the therapist left, and we never heard of him again. Until a few months ago, I became a teacher. Ironic, given my laziness when I was a teen. And one day, chatting with my coworker, I mentioned his name, talking about my weird, bizarre math teacher, and how I had skipped a detention hour. And one of my oldest coworkers went very pale hearing his name. In fact, a few days after the detention hour incident, my math teacher was arrested for having bad stuff from the dark web. Maybe my detention hour was really just a normal detention hour, and it would have went without a problem. But now, I will never know and will always wonder what would have happened if I would have stayed there and didn't catch the bus. And sorry, Flora, maybe you were expelled because of me.